So if anybody wanted to add anything to the agenda, that'd be cool. I put a couple things on there that I wanted to cover. Throw your name in as attending would also be good. I'm also a little distracted because I walk out of office hours into this, so it takes me a minute to like change my brain around. All right, so do you want to get started? Should we give it another couple minutes? What do y'all think?
I think whoever is late, it's their own fault. No.
Well, I was late, so I feel bad. All right, so the first thing I was going to say was to kind of quickly recap the KubeCon session, the open session. I don't know, I thought we had a really good turnout. Jay was there, I know. Justin looked for us and couldn't find us, but we did talk to him a little bit afterwards. And it was a little odd. For some reason, the map of the expo hall has the main entrance as this tiny little box instead of having like, something really obvious. So getting the orientation on the building and the space was really hard. Yeah, I don't know. We had like, I don't know, would you say 15 people, Jay? Give or take? That's what I thought. Yeah.
Yep, that's good for now.
Yeah, the only challenge was that there were at least 3 different agendas at the kind of meeting of what this group could be, and so we've been talking about. Well, we talked then about a bunch of like all kinds of different stuff, but one of the things that I thought was particularly interesting back for this group was that we kind of have faculty members who are interested in kind of the cloud native development thing, like myself, but we also had kind of the administration side show up as well, like so IT, and there were kind of 2 different groups there. There was IT, what we generally think of in the university land, right? There's typically 2 flavors of IT, even not even including like shadow IT, which is a whole nother thing, which everyone knows what that is, right? But so main IT is kind of like running business operations, and so like the financial systems of the university, and is very similar, I think, in a lot of ways to most IT departments. But then you have this other kind of IT department, which is usually focused on research, and it's not at every school unless it's a research school, but even those probably have some of it, where basically they're doing a lot more kind of ad hoc stuff because they have inbound faculty member with a big grant who wants to buy something, and so then they kind of build it and support it for them. And it's quite different than kind of mainline IT in the sense that it's way less I don't know, regimented, I guess is the only word I can think of. But the people who came, who were in those 2 categories, are both heavily using Kubernetes in both of those scenarios. And so that was kind of interesting. So what we were kind of talking about was, potentially trying to make a place for all 3 of those agendas, maybe, and doing something like, what the proposal was kind of like, have the meetings kind of rotate on topic area. So like one week, one meeting we might cover, kind of the cloud native development stuff, and then another week we might follow the talk about IT at universities, and then another week we talk about what I usually refer to as RCS, or research computing systems. So that was kind of one big thing that I thought was interesting that came up. There were I think a number of people who were kind of interested in all 3 of those subject areas. And then we also had a person who came who was kind of also interested in how, if we do develop this curricula, is there ways that they could support deploying that curricula online? They are an implementer, like they have a deployment and interest in a piece of software called OpenEdX, which is just it's an open source clone of edX, which is So edX is like the 800-pound gorilla of online class delivery, but they are proprietary and closed. So those are the big things that I thought were highlights. Does anybody have other stuff that they wanted to bring up?
I think not as much as at the open session, but I think there was some talk as well about supporting new students. I mean, definitely stuff around the faculty members interested in the development, but yeah, perhaps building up the students directly. And was there anything else? I heard there was some good conversation at the lunch session afterwards. Was there anything else that sort of branched off from that, or was it all a lot of the same sorts of things?
I actually wasn't at the lunch, so so I was kind of hoping some of the people who were there would be able to bring some of that.
I'll check in with some of the team who attended to give a bit more detail. We didn't get a chance for a full debrief, but I heard it was positive and pretty productive, so that's cool.
Cool. Chris, were you at the session?
No, I actually only heard about this, I think it was on Thursday when we met, Catherine, or it might have been Wednesday night.
Oh, okay, cool.
But yeah, so at KubeCon,
I'm like 95%
today.
sure there was a Chris there. That's why I was, but obviously last names or I may have missed. So that's cool. So was there anything else anybody wanted to add aside from, it seemed to be kind of successful? I am going to try to propose a talk for KubeCon EU to try to get, some, track, like to kind of say, hey, this is what we're doing and this is what we've done so far. I was talking to Josh Burkus about it, who many of you may know, and he was suggesting that we actually try to do it as a presentation with a different group that I'm blanking on. Sorry. I also caught COVID while I was there, so I'm still recovering a bit. But yeah, so Justin, do you have something you wanted to raise?
Yeah, I just think when we do this, we also want to think about what we want out of it. Because if we're trying to get instructors who are going to either create or use these materials into the session, there's not going to be that many of them there in attendance in general. So we just need to kind of think and be a little strategic from that standpoint. I don't actually know how to solve this other than to go to places where those people will be, which are the more academic conferences, and then pitch KubeCon to them.
Right.
But, we should just think about this because we're likely to get a bunch of polite people who are kind of not the core KubeCon folks, like the IT folks or folks in government who happen to want to see what's happening in education and they don't understand any of the tech talks. We're just not likely to get like people who teach classes because there's just not going to be that many of them.
Right. Yeah, I don't disagree at all. I was, I think I was also though kind of taking, we've had conversations in prior meetings, right, about trying to have some kind of material, like some sorry, I'm a little blanking, like something semi-concrete before we kind of bring it to academics. So I was kind of thinking that we would potentially propose for KubeCon with the expectation that we're trying to raise awareness in CNCF of the existence of this group more so than attract kind of real members or whatever, but kind of like solidify our status as like a real thing is kind of what my goal was really. But then start to look at academic conferences once we have something a little more concrete, like some actual things that maybe we could propose a talk at one of those. The other thing is that, if we do want to start, once, like I said, once we have something concrete, we want to start doing a little bit of marketing around it. I agree with Justin, right? We can definitely market KubeCon as a way to kind of come and learn more. And the price for academics is ridiculously cheap. It's only $200 for a ticket if you are coming from an academic institution. So I think we could do that. But like I said, the reason I wanted to present at KubeCon itself was actually just to really kind of establish it as something real, more so than necessarily to gather contributors. Does that make sense?
So I know Catherine has her hand up. I just want to add one thing, which is I think the reason why it's $200, if I remember correctly, is I asked Chris, hey, it's too expensive for me as an academic to come. And he got tired of just giving me and my students individual waivers and then just set the academic price.
Nice.
So
That's awesome. Yeah, actually, I was going very much in your direction, Langdon. I mean, awareness is really important, right, within the community, but also people may just know, like some people still have connections with the university and know maybe faculty members who are kind of like really into cloud native. So we don't want to do, because I know we wanted to wait for like real kind of push this to faculty when we have something a little bit more, but it just takes such a long time to really kind of reach people. So like doing a little bit and having like the community know about it, I think that's important, and it's never too early. And yeah, so I do think there is a lot of that.
Chris?
Yeah, so I was just curious, so for the mission of trying to bring in higher ed for cloud native, if you were to choose, right, I think higher ed can be kind of set into two places. There's the conventional education, so like the classes, and then there's also the research side of things. Not saying that they can't feed off of one another, right? But more specifically, what's your priority? What would you care more to get through this connection with higher ed?
So my goal, I would say, is primarily to enable faculty members to teach students. So primarily like classes, but that can mean a lot of things. It could be experiential learning, doing something, for a research program or whatever, but to teach them teaching that the approaches to modern development, so that when the students are, kind of leaving university, whether they're going on to do a master's or they're going on to get a job or they're going to get a PhD or whatever, they're starting to think about doing development in more, cloud native focused ways or more modern development techniques. So that's kind of been my goal. That was kind of the impetus behind me trying to start this group, right? Or really Catherine forcing me to start this group, or giving me a hard time to like start this group. So that was primarily my goal. My goal has never been particularly to focus on kind of the like how do you use Kubernetes per se, like not a tutorial on how to do like a Tekton pipeline, but rather why you would choose pipelines at all. Like what are they for? So I think, from a research perspective, I don't, there's a lot of research that goes on. One of the things actually that came up was two of the research clouds that came up during the open session. One that I'm aware of, which is affiliated with BU, which is called NERC, or New England Research Computing Research Cloud, something. Where they do both research on the undercloud and on the overcloud, which is kind of cool, using OpenStack terminology. So, but in order to get like workloads that are interesting for people who are doing, kind of innovative work around GPU, enabling or something, they actually have like computational bio running on hardware. And they're also doing a bunch of research about how you connect clouds together. There's an NSF funded grant to try to make it so that these various university clouds can actually, kind of interoperate and share resources. Which is also, I think, really interesting. But those are kind of more the research areas, but that wasn't really the goal of this group. It could be, if we do end up, it could be a fourth, right? Like, as in there's, there is a lot of research areas there. But I don't know how this working group would necessarily support that per se. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks. I was just curious since I can imagine those approaches being very different. And so I just wanted to learn what the priority was at this moment.
Yeah. I mean, I come from, I'm biased, right? I'm clinical faculty. I don't have a research requirement. So my goal is I want more of the students or I want to have more of the student population available to do. We do a lot of experiential learning projects, and one of the challenges we have with the experiential learning projects is that the students walk into this project for a third party with, they know how to write some Python code, but they don't really understand what it means to do software engineering. And there's a lot more, right? Particularly in a cloud native kind of with a cloud native like approach, right?
Yeah, especially the expectation that I feel like a lot of people have going into college is that it prepares you for industry. And
Right.
with the emergence of cloud native, I think we're seeing greater dissonance from what college is teaching you to what the industry is expecting.
Yes, exactly.
I
So, but
definitely
even
very
if,
much.
even if you use the traditional university model of, you go to undergrad for theory, right? And then you do a master's degree to get to the tactical. I don't even see the master's degrees really covering this kind of content that well. So even if you subscribe to the approach that the reason you go to college is because, you're learning the theory behind the field you're in, with a master's being the capstone that gets you into like software engineering or something. I think the gap is still there.
Yeah.
I think the pitch is a little different. Like, I think there's a computer science, like IT divide, or computer science, like engineering divide, more than a bachelor's master's. I just want to point that out. Because our bachelor's and master's classes are the same in some courses. There's like, those master's students might have to do a little more, but the content is basically identical. So it's more of like, I think a different way to think about it, and then I'll shut up and let the meeting get off this rabbit hole. But if you do IT, you're like learning how to drive a car. If you do more like CIS sort of stuff, you're learning a bit about how to be a mechanic. And computer science is more like how to design cars in some ways. And so I think that's a better analogy for the divide, and the bachelor's master's isn't as relevant. But that's just my perspective. Sorry, let me jump out.
Well, I mean, I don't disagree there. I mean, it's just, it's kind of I think the really simple example, right, is like, if you go do a political science degree, that does not prepare you to be a politician, right? Even though it seems like it should, right? You go and do something after your undergrad to go and learn how to be a politician, maybe. So I think the problem with software engineering is that or often I believe that there's kind of this timeline mismatch problem, is that in order to learn how to, design the car, and you often need to learn how to design the car and then also learn how to implement the car, like actually build the car. And that I think the expectation in a more traditional field like political science, right, is that in 4 years you probably learn how to design the car, and then in whatever, a year of a certain kinds of master's degree, or getting a law degree or something like that, that's kind of where you learn how to kind of build the car, right, become a politician or become somebody who uses politics. And in software engineering, I think the problem is that the people see like a coding camp where all you do is learn how to build the car. You don't really learn a lot about why you design it one way or another. And a 4-year degree plus a master's, like it's kind of like there's no, or at least for me, I think you could actually learn how to design the car and how to build the car in 4 years because our field is so small, relatively speaking, right? It's only been around for like 100 years, right? Medicine's been around for several thousand.
Yeah, I could imagine we could philosophize off of the ideal CSIP
Probably.
programs for probably until the next KubeCon. So just to spare us a bit from that, I think the big focus here is that there is clearly a dissonance. And I think that what has to be worked through is not only the educational materials, but I think that it's going to take a bit of acknowledgement as we reach out to these universities, because a lot of people I've heard stick to these talking points like, oh, you learn how to learn at university and stuff like that. And so I think this will be a very interesting challenge to get into. So I'm just very interested to see what all of your perspectives are on how we can best approach that to not only make the materials, but then also have the more academic crowds accepting to where the state of technology is today. So in that spirit, did we have any ideas off of just more immediately? I know we're talking about KubeCon, which is awesome. I think it's awesome to do a talk, but yeah, the academic crowd might not quite be there. But
I think I have some idea. I was thinking in the past months, like, why not to create like an open masterclass or something like that, when we can share a kind of big masterclass between different universities, just to schedule the thing, contact the professors and everything. One day, something like the environment sustainability week, like academic week or something like that, and we can do a shared masterclass every month just to start. I don't know.
Well, so I think that's kind of like the long-term goal. I think what we've been talking about over the last few meetings was trying to build, for lack of a better term. So let's say, there's an overall class called, whatever, cloud native dev or something. It's probably more than one class, but let's just say it's one, right?
Yeah.
What we've been talking about doing is like, hey, maybe what we could do is build essentially individual lectures, right? So build learning outcomes, build the content for the lecture, build maybe a demo, and then build maybe an assignment for, kind of as independent units. And that what we might be able to see, right, is take up of those individual units. As Justin was the primary kind of driver behind this because he's tried to do this in the past. And, as you probably may or may not know, right, faculty members have a tendency to not really trust anybody else's curricula. So as a result, if we can give them chunks, eventually maybe we'll have enough chunks, right, that we could actually have a whole class. But really, like, let's find a bunch of chunks that kind of start them down the path, and then maybe we can get some adoption on individual chunks, and the chunks being, like I said, kind of like one lecture sized, and then hopefully we'll have enough chunks eventually to string them all together into an actual class.
And the format of these chunks are the ones that are in the PR, right?
They're in, I don't think they're in a PR. They're in the Google Drive doc. But yes, the goal was to move them to GitHub. But we were having challenges getting the GitHub repo. But we have that now, so we can start to move that stuff.
Okay.
But it's right now they are in this like educational modules directory. I'll link in the chat.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
So
sorry.
I was just going to say we kind of made a template for them in there. But yeah, go ahead. I think that was Chris.
Yeah, so specifically, and I actually haven't had a chance to read through too much, but okay. Yeah, so have we considered learning or lab environments for these? And if so, have we considered where we could partner with other organizations towards that, just to streamline that sort of adoption of course material?
Can you elaborate on the question? Because I'm not sure I follow.
Yeah. So one of the best ways that I learned was using course materials, partly like Udemy. Also, Code Cloud was a great resource. And these are, you know, people who were able to find a business and helping to educate on this material, especially where there was a void. And I was wondering if there would be some opportunities to work with the grain on that. So if there might be some opportunities to reach out and set up some opportunities where, like, Code Cloud's very exemplary because they have free Kubernetes lab environments with their assignments. I just didn't know if we've had a chance to visit that yet, or if we're still, you know.
We haven't per se, in the sense that so a part of the reason that I think kind of raising some of the awareness or whatever is that I think there's a lot of content out there that would kind of come out of the woodwork where that people would be happy to put in, you know, that is either already open source or whatever, but to kind of put in some sort of shared place. And we are trying to, if you look in that folder I linked, there's we started to make a list of, you know, what I referred to as potential prior art, right? And what I think we would be really useful would be to start to, you know, kind of collect those. You know, I met at least 2 people at KubeCon who said, you know, oh, I have a class that teaches a bunch of this stuff. I would love to just kind of bring it to you and let you drop in the content, you know. And I think there may be a lot of that out there, and that we could, in a sense, this might turn into more curation as well as kind of you know, especially if you have like a developer evangelist, right, or tech evangelist of some kind. The way they write their content will be often missing some of the things that a faculty member will typically want. A really good example is learning outcomes, right? So, you know, at least when I was doing it, right, I was a tech advocate for a while. You know, I would never have written a content with the kind of as a precursor or like an intro that said, here are the learning outcomes I expect. So I hope that we might be able to identify a lot of that kind of prior art that we can kind of say, oh, you know, hey, this person has produced this content. Let's, you know, kind of make it into something that a faculty member could use more easily. And then, you know, and kind of, so it becomes almost more about curation and cleanup, even though it's not really unclean as much as it's just not for quite the right audience, as we could. Then kind of next to that, I think there are a lot of organizations who would be interested in offering kind of, you know, computing resources for free to students who are taking this stuff. You know, you name several, right? But I know Red Hat is also interested in that, and some of those computing clouds, like the NERC one in particular, really would like to have classes be hosted in their environment, because it kind of gives another, you know, reason for their existence, and they have free cycles, right? So they may as well be using them for something, and it's good marketing for them. So I think there's a number of those, and maybe collecting some of those contact points would be really good too. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. So I guess off of that, then, for action items going forward, did you have a list in mind?
With like which, what
Just-
kind of list?
Just for today, I was looking at the itinerary for action items.
Oh, so not yet. I wanted to kind of get to the new issues in GitHub. I created some GitHub issues where I could use some help. And basically we need to create a charter. You know, we have a document that we can definitely crib from, but, you know, I would like to have it be an official charter that, you know, this group collectively like votes on. We probably need to have an idea of what you know, we need to formalize the group a little bit. And so I made like 3 GitHub issues to kind of start to do that formalization. So I was hoping, those would be some of the action items. I think the other thing would be, oh, sorry, go ahead, Jay.
Just quickly, sorry, do you mind if we just, before we move on to that, just for your the KubeCon talk, so I think we went to a little bit of ideation with stuff, maybe suggesting that, as you said, there's a bit of a core focus here that needs to be identified, but also acknowledging that there's all these other sorts of branches that are sort of, with the research and, bring more academics that perhaps be raised to show like the scope of how big things are, because, we're sort of saying, potentially having rotating meetings and all that, if we can't get regular core attendance, even as you said, from some of those from the open session who didn't show to this one, just a little bit mindful of perhaps, breaking that down further and further without, showing everyone what the scope of it is. Because I mean, we saw that even happening at the open session, right? Even after it was identified that there was, different sort of focuses, that they were still sort of competing and talking over one another a little bit, just out of the passion and enthusiasm to see things happen. So, just wondering if we could, or if you wanted to try and nail down a little bit of an idea. I saw that you added in there as well around the CNCF certification group was the other one that would perhaps co-present with. So were there any thoughts about having a bit of an idea of that before going into the GitHub issues, or just want to park it for now?
So yeah, I think it's a little bit of the question of the group is, is it easier to get a core group, with kind of, the open arms method, and kind of we take all comers, but we have kind of a split focus, because I completely agree. It also didn't help that it was ridiculously noisy in there, so it was really hard to hear,
100%.
like even across the way. Or do we kind of say, hey, we think you should establish a different working group to, talk about administrative issues. And I think that's a very good question. I don't know the answer, unfortunately. Please, if somebody does, that would be great. I think everyone in the entire world would like to know the answer about what the better approach is. But I was kind of taking the interim approach of kind of just the open, let's go see what happens. But I think the difficulty, I think the focus, if we don't keep it somewhat focused on teaching, kind of higher ed kind of model versus the resolving kind of administrative issues, I think it'll be very hard to focus. There's a constant need for issue resolution, right? And it tends to it tends to be interrupting to almost all of the things, whereas the teaching component, I think, is kind of longer and takes more time. And I think it might lose its focus if that were the case.
To me, that sounds like the perfect segue to get into the charter. Since
Right,
ideally, if
exactly.
we can put this down in paper, then we have that focus. So would it be good for you, Jay, if we focus on that first and then we sort of circle back on that?
Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I wasn't sure how we'd want to kind of work on these, but there's if you look at the GitHub issues, there should be one called charter. I don't remember exactly what I called it. Oh yeah, develop charter for the group. And I stole some the other charter for as examples. And do we want to kind of sit here and kind of talk about what should be in that charter, or does somebody want to take a stab at writing the first draft? I can take a stab at writing the first draft, and we can talk about it in the next meeting and review it in the next meeting. I also wrote for the last meeting, which most of you were not here for, but kind of an elevator pitch for the group that needs review. Try to find the link. It's and either that elevator pitch is wrong, or it should be a good information for the charter, right? As if the elevator pitch and the charter should probably match.
For the charter, so I think, think we already have something to work with, which was initially what we created in the issue, right? Because that's what we did for the deaf and hard of hearing group. We kind of defined all these things. So I think like if we maybe put that all in a Google Docs and then maybe adjust it as needed and kind of add the sections that are missing about the meeting and so ever. So that should be fairly easy, right? Because that's the initial, like the vision might have changed and we have new people. So there might be some input, but I think we can take that as a basis versus starting from scratch. Oh, you're on mute now.
Yeah, sorry. That's why I linked it in the thing itself. So yeah, is it like, do you recommend like modifying this one, or do we start a new document that, is a clone? Or
I mean, I would just create, I can take that action item and just copy it in a Google Doc, and then I don't think, I mean, and make it more a charter in a charter format, but I don't think I have much to add because like the two of us worked on that. So my view is already in there. So it's like,
right.
job done. So I think like just maybe then, I mean, I'm gonna read it again just to see like if something changed in my mind, but I think like there is, our vision at least is already in there. And what we can do next is just like post it in the Slack channel and then have people review and, I don't know, offer like a week, not Thanksgiving week, maybe time to review and add comments. And if we don't get comments, that's it. And if we get comments, we leave them in and then we'll have a charter. So I think that's might be a good approach.
Yeah, the only thing that I think is missing in that document that, neither you or I have kind of put in there is kind of the mechanics of the organization. Which, because I ref the deaf and hard of hearing one, right? Which it does have a little bit of that, the facilitators and the chair and, the contact point, monthly meeting minutes. So that kind of thing. I think it's pretty easy to put in, but I wanted to make sure, we go through some process to do that.
The titles, I know that we have to formally kind of, because it's not officially a working group, but I think like we have enough people to kind of, I'll talk with Josh and Dawn if we're ready to kind of suggest it as like, you have to kind of put it out there and then the TOC members have to give us a thumbs up so it's officially a working group. I mean, they will say yes, I'm pretty sure, but it's like we have to do that before we can actually add that in there, the kind of like a messaging of a real working group. But I feel like we're ready because there is
I wasn't sure if to do that we would want the charter to essentially say, here's the charter.
Oh yeah, we do.
Can you declare it? Okay.
Yeah. We like the way, and I know that just because we just did it for the deaf and hard of hearing working group. So I think what we did was like the README, which was basically the charter without kind of putting like the leadership kind of information in there with the meeting information, everything. And then we created an issue, got the thumbs up, and then we updated that. So it's very straightforward. We just need to do that. But I think, so I think let's do the charter and then just get that into README, and then we'll get the issue up and ask the TOC to vote on it.
Yeah. I mean, I like that approach. I think that's, that's kind of what I also had in mind, right? I wasn't sure if just, it says WG in the GitHub repo name. So as far as I'm concerned, it's official. But
I know we were calling, like, how else are you going to call it? So it's like, but yeah. I don't know. I know there is that because I thought we were a working group super early, and I was like, and then like Josh told me, no, you're not a working group yet. It's like, what do you mean? We've been calling ourselves so it's official and unofficial. So there is like a process that is just a formality.
Okay.
So I'll take that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Add myself, I guess. Assign yourself. There I am.
And then just to kind of move on a little bit, there were kind of two other tickets in there basically. I don't think we can do number 2, right, the contributor strategy README, until we kind of do the rest of the charter stuff. But I was kind of hoping, there's stock repository content that kind of needs to go in. There is a CNCF project template. I think a lot of it can just be cribbed from. And I think that would be really useful. One I didn't create, but is certainly something that needs to be done, and something to consider, is trying to figure out how we might move the content that's in Google Drive to GitHub, or identify that we don't need to or don't want to. So basically, kind of that original link that I threw in there of like the idea behind how you create one of these educational modules or whatever. Does that template go in GitHub, and then the new, and then everything kind of gets created there, or is it cross-reference? The problem with doing it all in GitHub, obviously, is doing things like slides. Is a little bit harder in something like GitHub. So it could just be, here's a link to open, Google Docs or something. So that needs to be worked through, but I'm not sure how soon it needs to be done.
But it makes sense for it to be in GitHub, so it's like available to anyone, right? Not everyone has access or knows where the folder is.
Right. So I was imagining that there would be like the module definition, right, would be in GitHub, and it would say, to teach about, I can't remember what the first one we talked about doing was, but off the top of my head, I could go look, but thing A. So that would have essentially a README in some subdirectory of GitHub, and in that README would be some direct content, so maybe learning outcomes, etc., but then maybe a link to the lecture slides, rather than trying to force fit those into GitHub.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was thinking.
We should make it easy, right? So we can always
Yeah.
link as long as it's a link and it's accessible.
Right.
Not everything
Right.
is GitHub formatable, right?
Yeah. I mean, like, as much as I love things like Reveal, I find them not specific enough when I try to make slides. I'm far too particular for those to work for me.
I'm sure we can always also polish up the structuring of the repo once we, in that interim time, as people are looking over the charter draft and providing their feedback, since we're going to have a good week or two just before Thanksgiving break to the next meeting. So,
right.
Yeah. So is the current understanding, we'll just get the draft out, probably put it out on Slack, put something onto GitHub, and then we'll just sort of provide feedback for the next meeting?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Catherine?
That kind of things, like, I'm not really good at working on docs in a live meeting. So it's like, for me, it's like I have to do that on my own and read it. It's like really distracting. So I think like it just makes sense to discuss what we're gonna do, and then everyone gets the chance to kind of focus on their own and make their suggestions. And then we can also have a conversation through the comments and whatever, and make sure that everything is ready and either accepted or whatever by the next meeting, and then we can all agree that it can go up on GitHub, I think. Definitely sounds like a plan.
So
Cool.
Adding to the action item, and you all can help me wordsmith this, convert charter draft to docs and send out for feedback for the next 2 weeks.
And I also like to put names on it, because otherwise no one feels responsible. So I put my name there. Hold
Or
ourselves
to refine GitHub repo structure for charter. this sounds like Langdon, this sounds like a you thing since you've been taking point on that.
Sure. I don't know if I'm on
Alrighty.
mute.
Yeah, so off of that, was there anything else we wanted to kind of broach for this meeting?
Those are the big ones for me. You know, I don't know if anybody has anything else. You know, like I said, I think there's, you know, I was very, you know, it was a big warm and fuzzy, I think, last week. So I think there's some traction here, and I think there's something we can do here. So I'm excited to do it.
I think so too.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Cool. Corey, did we, was that enough of a recap? I'm sorry we couldn't pull you in. You wouldn't have been able to hear anything anyway.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I've been multitasking, sorry, but next meeting lands during reInvent. So I'll be at that, and I won't be attending a meeting. You know, I'm required because I teach AWS courses, so I have to go to the conference. But I will reuse your elevator pitch if you don't mind, and
For
see
sure.
who run into during that conference or anything cloud native. I'll bring back to our following meeting.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, should we wrap it up there then? Alrighty. Get 10 whole minutes back. All right. Thanks, y'all.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Here's all.